July the 9th, 1972, British soldiers from 1st Battalion Kings Regiment murdered 3 teenagers, including a young girl, a family man, and a local priest in the Springhill-Westrock Massacre. All Irish Catholics, all unarmed. Following day, July the 10th, 1972, One Kings released a 17-year-old Loyalist gunman to UDA paramilitary leader Tyrie, even though they had caught this teenager in the middle of a gun battle and threatening to murder Irish Catholics with an illegal weapon. 2 days, 1 British Army regiment, 2 estates on either side of one road, 2 completely different standards of justice. The secret British Army files that paper trail discovered cast a cold light on this casual collusion between the British Army and Loyalist paramilitaries. They also revealed the shocking extent of this double standard. While Irish families buried their dead, Loyalist paramilitaries walked free with British Army approval. Secret British military logs from July the 9th, 1972 show that One Kings killed the 3 unarmed teenagers, the family man and the local parish priest during the Springhill-Westrock Massacre. Another 2 unarmed locals were shot and injured. The British Ministry of Defence had tried to bury even which regiment was guilty of the murders for decades. All of the victims were Irish Catholics. One of the murdered teenagers was 13-year-old girl Margaret Gargan. Also murdered were David McCafferty, 15, John Dougal, 16, Patrick Butler, 39, and Father Noel Fitzpatrick, 40. Killings began with the British Army attack on 2 vehicles that had stopped on the street. Local witnesses testified that John Dougal tried to go to the aid of the injured of one of these vehicles when he was shot. John was my grandmother's nephew. Father Fitzpatrick and Patrick Butler were felled by the same bullet as they went to the aid of the injured. Father Fitzpatrick had just run from the church in his priestly garb and was waving a handkerchief as a sign that he was coming out and he was no threat to the British Army. David McCafferty was killed when he tried to drag Father Fitzpatrick's body to safety. Margaret Gargan was killed by a British Army sniper when she was talking with her friends a couple of hundred yards away. John Dougal and David McCafferty were later claimed as Fianna, Republican youth members of the Provisional and Official IRA. Civilian witnesses testify that none of the victims were armed, and later police tests found no trace of lead residue on their bodies. The British Army alleged they were under attack and returned fire. They then alleged the victims were caught in crossfire during an intense gun battle with the IRA, again disputed by civilian witnesses. The British Army then alleged Loyalists may have shot the victims before admitting at the original inquest that their soldiers injured and killed the victims. This inquest, of course, was a whitewash. The family fought with great dignity for truth and justice over the last 2 generations before securing a new inquest. The night after the massacre on 10th of July 1972, across the road and a few hundred metres away in Springmartin, One Kings arrested a Loyalist gunman during an interfactional shooting battle. His name and address is redacted, but we can see that One Kings reported that they arrested him carrying an unlicensed 9mm pistol, and he had 11 rounds in a holster. A few hours later, the commanding officer of One Kings reported to his 39 Brigade headquarters. Picked up boy, 17, with a weapon. UDA, Ulster Defence Association commander, is taking boy away, saying they, the UDA, will sort him out. Security forces have the weapon. RUC and company commander of One Kings agree best course of action is to let boy go. If detained by security forces, there will be a major incident and may foul up relations for 12th of July. The 12th of July, of course, was the 12th of July Orange Parades. At 2:22 a.m. on 11th of July 1972, the commanding officer insisted that the boy is fully photographed and documented and fully questioned, then handed over to RUC. Boy very frightened, name redacted, being told that this is the last chance. The redacted name here, I believe, was the name of UDA leader Tyrie, who then gave assurance to the CEO of One Kings. The CEO in turn said he would phone headquarters the following morning regarding these assurances. 39 Brigade then reported to headquarters Northern Ireland. Reference Protestant gunman. 17-year-old boy, stupid boy, UDA company commander, requested to deal with it, did not have firearms certificate, being released to the UDA on the advice of the RUC. A few minutes later, he then reported documentation and photos done. Boy will now be released by British military on the advice of RUC. The British state possessed detailed knowledge of Tyrie's position and influence within Loyalist paramilitarism months before the events of July 1972. The intelligence files from then confirmed that British forces maintained a comprehensive surveillance of UDA command structures whilst simultaneously facilitating their operations through direct collaboration. On July the 10th, 1972, the 1st Battalion Kings Regiment arrested the 17-year-old Loyalist gunman in the Spring Martin Road area of West Belfast. The teenager carried a 9mm pistol and 11 rounds of ammunition when British Army patrols apprehended him during intense interfactional fighting. Unlike the unarmed 13-year-old Catholic girl, one Kings murdered 24 hours earlier, this armed 17-year-old Protestant posed a genuine threat to everyone, including the British Armed Forces, through possession of illegal weapons and ammunition. When it handed the Loyalist gunman over, the British state effectively outsourced law enforcement to a known paramilitary leader, demonstrating the casual nature of collusion between British Armed Forces and Loyalist armed organisations in Belfast. The British authorities in these files recognised UDA command structures while simultaneously enabling their continued operations through official cooperation. 39 Brigade reported to British Army Headquarters Northern Ireland about the incident, referring to the gunman as a Protestant gunman, and noting that the UDA company commander requested to deal with the situation. The report stated that the boy was being released to the UDA on RUC advice, highlighting collaborative decision-making processes that prioritise Loyalist paramilitary interests over law enforcement. These communications document systematic preferential treatment afforded to armed Protestant organisations, in the UDA's case, one that remained legal until 1992. Tyrie's subsequent rise to become nominal leader of the UDA from 1973 to 1988 occurred despite British intelligence documented knowledge of his paramilitary activities. The British state promoted a known paramilitary commander through deliberate inaction, allowing him to coordinate decades of civilian murders whilst maintaining official protection. This trajectory demonstrates how individual acts of collusion enabled long-term violence against the Catholic community. This discrimination was systemic. In 1972, under the British Armed Forces arrest policy for Protestants, Protestants were specifically exempted from interim custody orders or internment without trial. This discriminatory approach to arrests without charge meant that the British state interned Irish Catholics alone. The policy revealed institutional bias that in effect protected Loyalist paramilitaries while subjecting the Irish community to detention without charge and violence. This single incident on July the 10th exemplifies the systematic protection afforded to Loyalist paramilitaries whilst Catholics faced immediate lethal force. The contrast between murdering unarmed Catholics and releasing an armed Protestant gunman reveals the British state's deliberate choice to enable Loyalist violence. These declassified documents prove that it was policy designed to maintain sectarian divisions while denying official responsibility for the consequences. Paper trail has also discovered further examples of collusion between the British military, RUC and Loyalists in these files, directly referencing Andy Tyrie's A Company UDA and a number of unsolved murders. In one British military intelligence report, a Loyalist leader, name redacted, openly discussed a number of murders of Irish Catholics. The British intelligence officer reported that the UDA, and in particular in this area, A and B companies, seemed to have been temporarily appeased by the positive approach adopted by the security forces. However, one or two incidents underline their increasing preparedness to use weapons to kill Catholics. The report named a number of victims whose names I will not record here, and goes on to say that the named Loyalist paramilitary leader, quote, made no secret of the fact that his company had been responsible. In one terrible murder, one of the perpetrators was himself shot and dropped a gun at the scene. The intelligence summary recorded, his second in command, who is named, owned the car which was used. The named paramilitary leader asked for the .45 revolver back, which had been lost during the incident, and a member of A Company, name and address provided, was admitted to hospital shortly after the incident. The named victim was going to be detained for interrogation, but that something had gone wrong and shots were exchanged. Here we have it in black and white. This named Loyalist leader discussed murders with British military, told them who was involved and asked for the gun back. A stark and as open admission that I have ever read in secret files. Paper Trail has researched this particular murder for a number of years and found archival information proving that the British Army and the RUC knew who committed this murder within hours anyway, and had connected the injured perpetrator in hospital to the murder. In fact, the RUC had discovered .45 bullets on this person whilst he was in hospital, but did not arrest him for the murder. He was never prosecuted for any paramilitary activity at all. When he was brought before the courts during the Loyalist Supergrass trials in the early 80s, the RUC actually told the judge that the killer had not been involved in anything since 1972, and he got off scot-free. The RUC did not tell the judge that he had committed a murder in 1972 and that they knew all about it. Nobody was prosecuted for this murder, and I do not know whether the murder gun was handed back to the UDA by the British Armed Forces, just as others had been in other terrible incidents. Paper Trail has provided all of this evidence to the family of the murder victim, and when I completed this report, I was informed that the killer is still alive. The contrast between July the 9th and July the 10th, 1972 reveals the British state's deliberate choice to protect Loyalist paramilitaries whilst waging war on the Catholic community. These declassified documents prove that collusion was not accidental but a systemic policy designed to enable organised Loyalist violence whilst denying its existence.